There may come a night, far in the future, when Earth is still blue, still alive, still turning quietly beneath the stars. The oceans are dark beneath the moonlight. Clouds drift over the continents. Cities glow like tiny constellations scattered across the land. From space, the planet looks peaceful, almost untouched, as if nothing important is about to happen. But high above the atmosphere, beyond the last thin breath of air, something enormous is waiting. Not one ship, a fleet. 10 vast structures hang in orbit, slowly turning in the silence. They are too large to have ever risen from the ground. No rocket could have lifted them whole. They were built here, piece by piece, over many decades, by machines, engineers, orbital shipyards, and generations of people who knew they might never see the project finished. From Earth, on clear nights, some of them can be seen as moving stars. But they are not stars. They are cities. Each one is a world folded into metal and glass. Each one carries air, water, soil, forests, seeds, machines, memories, and human voices. Each one was designed to hold 100,000 people, though only 25,000 will board at the beginning. The empty space is not wasted. It is waiting. Waiting for children. Waiting for gardens. Waiting for repairs, accidents, migrations, and futures no one can yet imagine. For centuries, humans have dreamed of leaving Earth. Usually, we imagine a single ship. One lonely vessel crossing the darkness between stars. A silver ark carrying the last hope of humanity toward a distant sun. It is a beautiful idea. Simple, powerful, easy to picture. But perhaps it is also too fragile, because if humanity ever truly tried to travel to another solar system, we might not send one ship into the night. We might send many. We might send a fleet large enough to behave not like a spacecraft, but like a moving civilization. A civilization with neighborhoods, schools, hospitals, farms, workshops, libraries, cemeteries, songs, arguments, rituals, and dreams. A civilization spread across several motherships, each one independent, but never completely alone. If one ship became sick, the others could help. If one habitat failed, another could receive its people. If one community grew too isolated, families could move between ships. If one crop vanished, seeds could be sent from another vessel. If one generation forgot too much, another ship might still remember. This is the difference between a single ark and a fleet. A single ship carries passengers. A fleet carries a species. And tonight, in this imagined future, the fleet is almost ready. Below, Earth turns slowly. Every ocean, every desert, every mountain range, every glowing city is still there. The people boarding the ships are not fleeing from a dead world. They are leaving a living one. That may be the hardest part. They are not escaping a fire. They are not running from extinction. They are doing something stranger. They are choosing to send part of humanity into a darkness so wide that no human eye can truly understand it. The nearest stars are not close. They only look close because the night sky is kind to us. It hides distance behind beauty. It turns impossible emptiness into points of light. But between the sun and the next star, there is almost nothing. No air, no warmth, no blue sky, no sunrise in the old sense. Only black space, scattered dust, radiation, and time. A journey to another solar system would not be a trip. It would not be an expedition in the old heroic sense. It would be an inheritance passed from parent to child and from child to grandchild until Earth itself became less like a place and more like a story. Some of the people who board these ships will remember real rain. They will remember standing outside under an open sky. They will remember the smell of forests after summer storms, the sound of waves at night, the feeling of sunlight that was not made by a machine. but their children may not. Their grandchildren almost certainly will not. For them, Earth will be a lesson, a holy word, a blue sphere in old recordings. They will learn that oceans once stretched farther than the eye could see. They will learn that the sky was not a ceiling. They will learn that gravity was not produced by rotation, and that people once slept beneath a moon instead of beneath shielded metal and artificial stars. And yet, they will still be human. They will still wake in the morning. They will still fall in love. They will still grow old. They will still look out through windows and wonder what waits beyond the dark. On the final night before departure, the fleet brightens. Across the planet, people look up. Some are proud. Some are afraid. Some believe it is the greatest achievement in human history. Others quietly wonder whether anything so far from Earth can still be called home. In orbit, the motherships begin their slow alignment. Their engines are not yet firing. Their great habitats turn gently, creating the soft pull of artificial gravity inside. Shuttlecraft move like fireflies between docking ports. Final passengers arrive with small bags, old photographs, letters, seeds, musical instruments, and pieces of a world they know they cannot carry whole. No one says goodbye to Earth all at once. Goodbye happens in fragments. A hand pressed against a window, a child asking why the planet looks so small, an old woman closing her eyes as the Pacific Ocean turns beneath her for the last time, a young engineer listening to the hum of the ship and realizing that this sound may follow her family for centuries. Then, slowly, almost gently, the fleet begins to move. Not fast, not dramatically. At first, it is only a change in orbit, a tiny shift in velocity, a quiet commitment written in physics. But every second, Earth becomes a little farther away. The planet that made them, fed them, frightened them, and taught them to dream begins to shrink behind them. Ahead lies the open dark, and somewhere inside that dark, impossibly distant, waits another sun. This is not the story of one ship traveling alone. This is the story of what might happen if humanity decided that crossing the stars was too dangerous for a single vessel, too important for a single failure, and too beautiful for a single dream. This is the story of a fleet of generation ships, leaving Earth behind, and carrying the unfinished memory of our world toward another solar system. For a long time, the dream of interstellar travel has often been imagined as one magnificent ship, one ark, one vessel carrying humanity's hope across the darkness. It is a clean image, almost mythological, a single point of light leaving the solar system, moving slowly away from the sun, carrying a small world inside its walls. A ship like that feels easy to understand because it gives the journey a shape, a beginning, a destination, a fragile line between the world we know and the world we hope to find. But the more we think about it, the more delicate that dream becomes. Because a generation ship would not be like a spacecraft sent to the moon. It would not be like a station orbiting Earth, where help is only a launch away. It would not even be like a probe sent to the outer planets, because a probe can fail in silence and no one dies with it. A generation ship would be different. It would be alive. Inside it, air would have to be remade again and again. Water would have to be cleaned, recycled, and protected for centuries. Food would have to grow in sealed ecosystems where one small imbalance could slowly become a disaster. Machines would have to repair other machines. Children would be born who had never seen Earth. Entire families would live and die inside a structure built by ancestors whose names might eventually become history. And if that one ship failed, there would be nowhere else to go. That is the quiet terror hidden inside the dream of a single generation ship. Not explosions, not fire, not dramatic catastrophe. Something much slower. A crop disease spreading through the agricultural decks. a water purification system losing efficiency year after year, a genetic problem that no one notices until several generations have passed, a political fracture between communities that cannot separate because they are trapped inside the same metal world, a mistake in the population plan, a failure in the shielding, a computer system that becomes impossible to fully understand because the engineers who designed it died centuries earlier. On Earth, civilizations survive because they are spread out. If one city falls, another remains. If one harvest fails, food can be moved from elsewhere. If one region becomes dangerous, people can migrate. If one culture forgets something, another may preserve it. Earth is not safe because it is simple. Earth is safe because it is vast, varied, and redundant. A single ship has almost none of that. It may be large, it may be beautiful, it may be engineered with extraordinary care. But it is still one body, one ecosystem, one political world, one chain of command, one atmosphere, one sealed future. And that is a dangerous way to carry a species. A fleet changes the shape of the problem. Imagine 10 mother ships traveling together through the dark, each one separated by distance, but connected by communication, planning, and smaller transfer vessels. Each ship has its own farms, its own water systems, its own doctors, engineers, teachers, archives, and repair yards. Each one can survive alone for a time, but none of them has to remain alone forever. If one ship loses a crop, another can send seeds. If one ship suffers from a shortage of trained surgeons, another can send doctors. If one ship's population becomes too genetically narrow, families can migrate. Frozen embryos, genetic records, and carefully planned marriages between communities can help preserve diversity across the whole fleet. If one habitat becomes damaged, people can be moved. Not easily, not casually, perhaps not quickly, but they can be moved. And that one fact changes everything, because a fleet does not simply multiply the number of ships, it multiplies the number of second chances. This is why the fleet would not be arranged like a military formation. It would be more like a drifting archipelago, a chain of islands moving through an endless black ocean, each island with its own lights, its own homes, its own sleeping children, its own gardens beneath glass. From far away, the ships might look like a loose constellation, not close enough to endanger one another, not so far apart that they become strangers. They would travel with careful spacing, perhaps thousands or tens of thousands of kilometers between them, depending on their speed, their communication systems, and the risk from debris. In the deep space between stars, even a tiny particle can become dangerous if it is struck at high velocity, so the ships would not crowd together. They would keep their distance, like great whales moving through a dark sea. But distance would not mean isolation. Radio signals would pass constantly between them. Navigation data, medical updates, birth records, engineering alerts, weather reports from artificial climates, messages from families, music, lessons, news, arguments, stories. Every ship would know that the others were still there. And for human beings, that knowledge might matter almost as much as food or air, because one of the greatest dangers of a generation ship would not be technical, it would be psychological. Imagine being born on a ship that has no possibility of turning back. Imagine growing up knowing that the destination is real, but that you may never live to see it. Imagine being told that Earth exists, but only in images. Imagine understanding that every choice your society makes must be measured not in years, but in centuries. A single ship could become a closed mind. A fleet could remain a conversation. Different ships might develop different customs. One might become famous for music, another for engineering, another for medicine, another for preserving Earth's languages. One ship might celebrate the anniversary of departure with silence, while another fills its central habitat with lanterns and songs. Over generations, these differences would grow, and that would be healthy, because culture, like biology, needs variation. A fleet would allow humanity to remain plural, not one isolated community slowly turning inward, but several communities watching one another, learning from one another, disagreeing, exchanging, remembering. The ships would not just share spare parts. They would share perspective. A young student from Ship 2 might spend a year studying ecology on Ship 5. A family from Ship 8 might move to Ship 3 because their children were part of a long-term genetic exchange plan. A group of engineers might travel from Ship 1 to Ship 7 to help rebuild a damaged turbine system. A choir from Ship 6 might send recordings to every other vessel during the long artificial winter. Small things, perhaps. But on a journey that lasts centuries, small things become civilization. This is the deeper reason one ship would never be enough. Not because one ship cannot be built. Perhaps one day it could. Not because one ship cannot cross the distance. With enough patience, perhaps it could do that too. But a single ship would ask too much of itself. It would have to be a city, a country, a biosphere, a school, a hospital, a library, a government, a cradle, and a tomb. It would have to carry every backup inside its own walls. It would have to survive every mistake without outside help. It would have to keep hope alive while never hearing another human world answer back. A fleet would still be fragile, but it would be fragile in a more human way, like a family spread across many homes, like villages along a river, like ancient sailors crossing an ocean not in one boat, but in many, watching for each other's lanterns in the night. And perhaps that is how humanity would really go. Not as a single spear thrown into the dark, not as one lonely ark surrounded by silence, but as a slow, patient caravan of worlds, carrying the memory of Earth from ship to ship, from child to child, from one artificial sunrise to the next, because the stars are too far for one vessel to carry everything, and the future is too precious to place inside a single point of light. A fleet like this could not be born on Earth. It would be too large, too heavy, too delicate, and too strange to rise from the ground in one piece. No launch tower could hold it. No rocket could lift it whole. No single nation, company, or generation could simply decide to build it and watch it leave a few years later. A generation fleet would have to grow slowly, not like a machine, like a city. It would begin long before departure, in the quiet industrial zones of orbit, where Earth fills half the sky and the stars are no longer hidden by air. At first, there would be only small stations, dockyards, fuel depots, construction platforms, robotic arms moving in silence, storage tanks shining in sunlight, solar arrays opening like dark glass flowers above the planet. Then, piece by piece, the first ship would begin to appear. Not as a finished vessel, but as a skeleton, a long central spine, a ring frame, a cluster of pressure modules, a shielded core where the most fragile systems would one day sleep, a docking hub for shuttles, a workshop for machines that had not yet been invented when the ship was first designed. From Earth, it might look unimpressive at first, a faint shape crossing the night sky, a line, a glimmer, a construction site among the stars. But up close, it would be enormous. The first generation of workers would not be passengers. They would be builders. They would spend their lives assembling something they might never use. They would check welds, seal pressure walls, test radiation barriers, install cables, inspect water tanks, and teach robots how to repair sections no human hand could easily reach. Some would return to Earth after their shifts in orbit. Others would live permanently in construction habitats, raising children who grew up with Earth always beneath them, but never quite under their feet. Those children might become the second generation of builders, and their children might finish the first mothership. That is the scale of such a dream. Interstellar travel would not begin with engines. It would begin with patience. The raw material would have to come from everywhere humanity could reach. Earth could provide some of the most complex equipment: computers, medical systems, precision instruments, seeds, archives, art, delicate machines. But most of the mass could not come from Earth's deep gravity well forever. Lifting billions of tons from the surface would be too expensive, too wasteful, too slow. So the fleet would be built from the solar system itself. Metals from asteroids, ice from distant bodies, regolith from the moon, carbon, nickel, iron, silicates, water, and rare elements gathered by mining craft that move like patient insects among the rocks. Before humanity could leave the solar system, it would first have to learn how to use it. The moon might become a quarry and a shipyard. Asteroids might become floating mines. Orbital factories might melt, refine, print, cast, and assemble components in microgravity. Huge mirrors might focus sunlight into industrial furnaces. Autonomous machines might work for years without stopping, building the same beams, panels, tanks, and trusses over and over again. And slowly, above Earth, the fleet would take shape. One ship, then two, then 5, then 10. Each mothership would be built from a common design, but not as an exact copy. That would be too dangerous. If every vessel shared the same weakness, one hidden flaw could threaten the entire fleet. So the ships would be sisters, not clones, similar enough to share parts and knowledge, different enough that one design failure could not doom them all. Ship 1 might have the most tested agricultural system. Ship 2 might carry expanded medical facilities. Ship 3 might specialize in manufacturing. Ship 4 might carry the largest genetic archive. Ship 5 might contain the deepest cultural library. Ship 6 might have extra shielding and serve as a storm refuge during periods of intense radiation. Ship 7 might be designed for education and training, where every generation learns not only how to live, but how to maintain the fragile world around them. The others would carry their own strengths, their own redundancies, their own quiet purposes. Together, they would form something larger than engineering. They would form a distributed civilization. The central structure of each ship would likely be protected, and still, filled with storage, reactors, navigation systems, emergency shelters, archives, and long-term machinery. Around it, great rotating habitats would turn slowly to create artificial gravity. From the outside, each mothership might look almost impossible to classify. Part cathedral, part wheel, part forest, part fortress, part seed. The rotating sections would be among the most important parts of the design. Humans can survive in weightlessness for a time, but a society meant to live for centuries would need something closer to normal gravity. Bones, muscles, pregnancy, childhood development, circulation, balance, agriculture, plumbing, architecture, all of it becomes easier when there is a reliable downward pull. So the habitats would spin. Not violently, not quickly enough to feel like a carnival ride, just steadily, gracefully, creating a gentle artificial ground beneath people's feet. Inside those rotating rings, the first test neighborhoods would be planted years before departure. No one would trust a closed world that had never lived. The soil would be watched. The water would be cycled. The crops would grow and fail and grow again. The air would be measured every second. Microbes would spread through controlled beds of earth. Bees, or robotic pollinators, or carefully selected insects might be introduced into sealed agricultural zones. A generation fleet could not simply store food. It would have to grow food. It could not simply carry water. It would have to remember water. Every drop would matter. Every leak would be a wound. Every plant would be part of the ship's breathing. Before the first passengers ever boarded, entire ecosystems would have to prove that they could survive inside metal walls. This is where the fleet would become more than a machine. A machine can be switched on. A living world must be cultivated, and cultivation takes time. Decades before departure, the ships would already have seasons. Artificial ones, perhaps, but seasons nonetheless. Some agricultural decks might enter long periods of simulated winter to test storage and recovery. Other sections might run endless spring, growing leafy greens under soft panels of light. Orchards might be planted in curved valleys, where the horizon rises strangely overhead. Fungi would work in dark recycling chambers. Algae would bloom in glass tubes. Water would move through filters, roots, pipes, and membranes. Children visiting from Earth might stand inside these habitats and feel confused. They would see trees growing beneath a ceiling. They would watch the ground curve upward in the distance. They would look above and see another neighborhood hanging overhead, upside down from their point of view, with people walking calmly beneath its own artificial sky. And the adults would tell them, "This is not a park. This is a rehearsal. Because one day, this place must live without Earth." The outside of the ships would be built for a different kind of survival. Space between stars is emptier than anything humans know, but it is not truly empty. There are particles, dust grains, radiation, cosmic rays, high-energy fragments moving through the dark. At interstellar speeds, even tiny things become serious. A grain of dust, harmless in your hand, can strike like a bullet when met at a fraction of the speed of light. So the leading edges of the ships would be heavily protected. Layers of shielding, sacrificial plates, water walls, magnetic systems perhaps, Whipple shields spaced far apart, materials designed not to stop every impact perfectly, but to absorb, scatter, and survive damage over time. Some parts of the ship might be designed to be replaced from the inside. Others might be repaired by drones crawling across the hull during long, quiet years. There would be no repair crew from Earth, no emergency launch, no rescue mission. The fleet would have to carry its own hands. Robots would be everywhere, but not as masters of the ship, more like caretakers. Inspection drones moving through maintenance shafts. Spider-like machines walking across the outer hull. Autonomous welders sealed in radiation-resistant garages. Tiny sensor craft flying ahead of the fleet, tasting the darkness for dust and danger. Every ship would be both home and factory. It would need to produce replacement parts not for years, but for centuries. It would need machine shops, fabrication bays, raw material storage, recycling foundries, chemical processors, electronics labs, and places where old machines could be taken apart and reborn as new ones. Nothing could be treated as trash in the old sense. A broken panel would become feedstock. A worn-out pipe would become metal powder. An outdated device would become spare elements for something newer. Even human waste would become part of the ecological cycle, broken down, purified, transformed, returned to soil and air and water. The fleet would survive by refusing to waste the past. And while all of this was being built, Earth would watch. At first, perhaps with excitement, then with politics, then with doubt, then with pride, then with fatigue, then with awe again. Projects that last for generations do not remain simple. Governments change. Economies rise and fall. Religions, movements, and philosophies form around the meaning of the fleet. Some people see it as humanity's greatest insurance policy. Others see it as abandonment. Some ask why so much effort should be spent on a destination no living person may reach. Others answer that every cathedral, every forest, every language, and every child is also an investment in a future the builders may never see. The fleet would become a mirror. People would look at it and see whatever they believed about humanity. Hope, arrogance, fear, destiny, escape, curiosity, a monument to survival, a refusal to stay small. Decade after decade, the ships would grow brighter. Their rings would close. Their shields would thicken. Their farms would stabilize. Their engines would be tested in short, careful burns. Their internal clocks would be synchronized. Their archives would be filled with everything humanity could bear to preserve. Not just science. Music, languages, maps, myths, recipes, court records, birdsong, children's books, medical textbooks, old films, photographs of extinct animals, voices of people saying ordinary things on ordinary days. Because if the fleet survived, these fragments would become more than records. They would become roots. At last, when the 10th mothership completed its final pressure tests, the fleet would no longer look like construction. It would look like waiting. 10 immense habitats in orbit, turning slowly above the planet that made them. The oceans below still moving, the clouds below still changing, the cities below still glowing through the night. And between Earth and the stars, the fleet would hang like a question humanity had spent a century learning how to ask. Could life leave its cradle without becoming less alive? Could a world be built inside a ship? Could memory survive the space between suns? The builders would not know. They could only finish the work. They could only seal the habitats, fill the tanks, test the engines, plant the last trees, upload the last archives, and open the docking ports for the people who would become the first generation of the voyage. The fleet had been assembled in orbit, but it had been built from something older than metal. It had been built from the human habit of looking at the horizon and wondering what waits beyond it. To understand the fleet, you would have to step inside one of the motherships. From the outside, it might look cold and almost impossible to love. A vast structure of metal, shielding, radiators, docking ports, engines, and slowly turning rings. It would not look like a home. It would look like a machine built to survive distances the human mind was never meant to cross. But the outside would not tell the truth. Inside, the ship would feel less like a spacecraft and more like a small, careful world. You would enter near the central spine, where gravity is weak and everything seems to float slightly out of place. Tools are clipped to walls. Handrails follow every corridor. Soft lights guide passengers through docking tunnels, medical checkpoints, storage bays, and maintenance shafts. This is the protected heart of the ship, the place where the most fragile things are kept safe. Here, behind layers of shielding, the ship carries its deepest memory. Seed vaults, frozen embryos, medical archives, cultural records, navigation systems, backup computers, old recordings of Earth, languages, music, maps, books, and voices from a planet slowly falling behind. It would be quiet here, not silent, because no living ship is ever silent. Air would move through vents, pumps would pulse behind the walls, the structure would hum softly, like a sleeping animal. But compared to the habitat rings, the central spine would feel almost sacred, a place of memory, a place where the future is protected in darkness. Then you would move outward. A long elevator carries you from the central spine toward the rotating habitat ring. At first, your body still feels light. Then, little by little, weight returns. Your feet press more firmly against the floor. Your shoulders remember gravity. Your inner ear adjusts. The ship slowly teaches your body which way is down. And then the doors open. For a moment, you might forget you are inside a machine. Ahead of you is a wide internal valley, curving gently into the distance beneath an artificial sky. The light is warm and soft, like morning, filtered through thin clouds. The air smells faintly of leaves, water, soil, metal, and human life. There are homes here. Not endless cities, not wasteful towers, not broad highways stretching under open air. Space is too precious for that. But there are neighborhoods, compact apartments, shared gardens, schools, clinics, kitchens, walkways, quiet plazas where people gather during evening cycle. Everything is designed with purpose. A wall can fold, a room can change function, a public hall can become a shelter, a garden can be beautiful and also part of the air system. Nothing is only one thing. That is one of the first lessons of a mothership. A tree is not just a tree. It gives comfort, absorbs carbon dioxide, teaches children about Earth, and reminds adults that survival without beauty is not enough. A pond is not just a pond. It stores water, supports biology, calms the mind, and gives people a place to sit when the metal world feels too small. A classroom is not just a classroom. It is where children learn history, mathematics, ecology, engineering, and the most important lesson of all, the ship is not magic. The ship survives because people understand it. Every child born here would grow up knowing that air must be made, water must be returned, food must be grown, and walls must be respected. On Earth, a child could ignore the hidden systems that kept them alive. On a generation ship, ignorance would be dangerous. So education would be everywhere. A group of students might visit the water recovery deck and learn how yesterday's breath becomes tomorrow's drinking water. Another class might walk through the farms and discover that soil is not dirt, but a living society of microbes, roots, minerals, fungi, and time. Older students might apprentice with engineers, nurses, farmers, archivists, and repair crews. The ship would raise citizens, not passengers. In the agricultural sections, the world becomes greener. There are no open fields like those on Earth. Instead, food grows in layers, hydroponic towers, root beds, algae tubes glowing softly in glass corridors, mushroom chambers in warm darkness, small orchards where fruit is treated almost like treasure. Herbs grow in public kitchens, so even ordinary meals can carry memory. Food aboard the ship would be mathematics, but also culture. Calories matter. Water cost matters. Nutrient cycles matter. But flavor matters too. A family might cook a recipe brought from Earth generations earlier, even if some ingredients have changed. Children might taste fruit from a tree whose ancestor once grew under a real sun. A cup of tea might become a ceremony, not because it is rare, but because it reminds people that they are more than biological systems keeping themselves alive. They are human. There would be hospitals too, but they would not only treat sickness, they would protect the long future of the population. Doctors would monitor radiation exposure, childhood development, fertility, nutrition, mental health, and the quiet stress of living inside a sealed world. A doctor on Earth treats a patient. A doctor on a generation ship helps treat a civilization. There would also be places for grief. A memorial garden where names are recorded. A quiet chamber facing the direction of Earth, even after Earth is too far away to see. A room where old recordings of rain, forests, birds, and ocean waves can be played for people who need to remember a planet they never touched. Because, eventually, no one aboard will have seen Earth. The first generation will remember real sunlight, real wind, real storms, real beaches, real mountains. Their children will remember the stories. Their grandchildren may remember only the recordings. A child born in the third generation might look at a video of the ocean and ask, "Was it really that big?" And a teacher might answer, "Yes, bigger than anything inside this ship." The child may try to imagine water with no walls, no tanks, no pipes, no number assigned to every drop. That might sound like a miracle, or a myth. This is the quiet sadness of a mothership. It preserves Earth, but it cannot fully recreate it. It can carry forests, but not wilderness. It can carry water, but not oceans. It can carry sky panels, but not the sky. It can carry birdsong, but not a morning where birds choose to sing on their own. And yet, it carries enough. Enough for children to grow. Enough for families to form. Enough for old people to sit beneath leaves and feel peace. Enough for songs, birthdays, arguments, stories, lessons, repairs, gardens, and sleep. At night cycle, the artificial sky dims slowly. The habitat becomes quiet. Windows shift to simulated stars or dark glass. In the farms, plants continue their silent work. In the central spine, archives sleep behind shielding. Somewhere, water moves through roots. Somewhere, a technician listens to a pump and smiles because the sound is healthy. Outside the hull, there is only darkness. Inside, a child sleeps beneath a ceiling, pretending to be night. And the mothership keeps turning. Slowly, patiently, carefully. Not as a perfect world. Not as a replacement for Earth, but as a promise under maintenance, carrying a small piece of life toward another sun. At first, the number seems strange. If each mothership can hold 100,000 people, why would only 25,000 board at the beginning? Why send a ship into interstellar space with so many empty rooms? Why build quiet neighborhoods no one lives in yet? Why carry unused schools, sealed apartments, sleeping farms, and entire districts waiting in darkness? On Earth, empty space often feels like waste. But on a generation ship, empty space is not waste. It is survival. A ship filled to its maximum population on the day it leaves Earth would be dangerously fragile. It might look efficient, but efficiency is not always wisdom. In deep space, a civilization cannot live at the edge of its limits. It needs margins. It needs reserve. It needs room to make mistakes and still recover. If every apartment is full, there is nowhere to move people during repairs. If every farm is already working at maximum output, one crop failure becomes a crisis. If every liter of water is already assigned, one leak becomes fear. If every school, clinic, and public space is crowded from the beginning, then every future child becomes pressure on the system. And a generation ship cannot treat future children as a problem. They are the reason the ship exists. So the first generation does not fill the vessel. They begin the story. 25,000 people board each mothership, while the remaining space waits for the centuries ahead. Some districts are kept sealed. Some are reserved for future families. Some are held as emergency shelters. Some are left for new farms, new workshops, new hospitals, and new communities that no one can fully predict yet. A generation ship is not a hotel. It is not built for one moment of departure. It is built for a long unfolding of life. The empty rooms are not truly empty. They are promises. A young couple might walk past a school where no child has ever sat at a desk. The lights are dim. The walls are clean. The classrooms are stocked but unused. Outside, small trees grow in a courtyard, planted decades before anyone needs the shade. The couple might stop there for a moment. They might imagine grandchildren they will never meet. Children who will be born after Earth is only a bright memory. Students who will one day run through these halls as if they had always belonged there. That is what the empty space means. Not absence, anticipation. The ship begins with 25,000 because life needs room to grow slowly. Human populations are not simple numbers. They are families, ages, skills, health, culture, emotion, and choice. If too many children are born too quickly, the ship strains. If too few are born, the population ages and knowledge begins to thin. If communities remain too isolated, genetic diversity can narrow over time. So the fleet must be careful. Not cold, careful. Births would not be treated like machine output. Families would still love their children as children, not as population statistics. But everyone aboard would understand that having a child inside a sealed world also touches air, water, food, medicine, education, and the lives of generations still to come. On Earth, a city can expand outward. A generation ship cannot. It must expand inward, slowly, into the space prepared for the future. This is why the unused capacity matters so much. It gives the ship time to test its farms, time to balance its water systems, time to train new doctors and engineers, time to open new districts only when the society is ready for them. A ship that begins full becomes rigid. A ship with room can adapt. And adaptation may be the difference between arrival and silence. The extra space also protects the fleet during disaster. Imagine one mothership loses part of its agricultural ring. Nothing dramatic happens at first. No explosion, no fire. Only a slow yellowing of leaves, a fungal spread, a failure in the soil chemistry, a harvest that comes in smaller than expected. If the ship were full, the crisis would press against every wall. But because the fleet planned for space, people can move. Another ship can open a sealed residential sector. A third ship can receive children and medical patients. A fourth can activate reserve farms. Specialists can travel between vessels. Families can be relocated until the damaged ecosystem is repaired. In a single ship, empty rooms might seem inefficient. In a fleet, empty rooms become mercy. The same is true for disease, conflict, or mechanical failure. If one district must be quarantined, people need somewhere else to live. If an old part of the habitat must be rebuilt, residents need temporary homes. If a social conflict becomes too intense, migration to another district or another ship may release pressure before it becomes dangerous. A spacecraft needs pressure valves. A civilization needs them too. This is one of the quiet reasons a fleet is more believable than a single arc. It allows movement. Not constant movement, and not easy movement, but enough to remind people that their birth ship is not the entire human universe. A family from Ship 3 might one day move to Ship 7. A doctor from Ship 2 might settle on Ship 9. A group of children from a damaged district might spend 2 years growing up under another ship's artificial sky. These movements would help the fleet stay open, biologically and culturally. People would carry accents, recipes, songs, skills, stories, and family lines from one mothership to another. The empty space makes this possible. It gives humanity somewhere to shift without breaking. Still, there would be arguments. Every generation might be tempted to use more than it should. Some would ask why entire districts remain sealed when people want larger homes. Others would argue that the reserved farms should be opened early, or that future capacity should serve the living, not the unborn. And perhaps they would have a point. A generation ship would always live inside this tension. How much belongs to the people alive today, and how much must be saved for those who are not born yet? There may be no perfect answer, only stewardship. The first generation would hold the ship for the second for the third for children who might not arrive at the new star for hundreds of years. That is why the ship begins partly empty, because the mission is not about the people who leave Earth. It is about the people who will arrive. The difference between 25,000 and 100,000 is the voyage itself. It is the children born in darkness, the families formed between ships, the emergency shelters open during crisis, the farms planted after a century, the schools filled long after the first passengers are gone, the quiet streets waiting for footsteps. When the fleet leaves Earth, it carries air, water, machines, seeds, archives, and old memories of the blue planet behind it. But it also carries emptiness, carefully protected emptiness. Emptiness with lights installed but not yet turned on. Emptiness with soil waiting beneath sealed covers. Emptiness with names assigned to streets no one has walked. In deep space, That emptiness would not be waste. It would be love, measured in room for the future. The first law of a generation ship is simple. Nothing disappears. Not air, not water, not food, not waste, not heat, not even the smallest invisible life inside the soil. On Earth, people can forget this. A person drinks a glass of water without wondering where it has been. They breathe without thinking about forests. They throw something away and trust that it will vanish somewhere beyond sight. But inside a mothership, there is no away. Everything remains inside the world. Every breath enters the cycle. Every drop of water has a history. Every meal becomes part of tomorrow's soil. Every piece of waste is either a problem or a resource. A generation ship would not simply carry people between stars. It would carry the cycles that make people possible. Air would be the first miracle. Inside the habitat rings, passengers would breathe air that is constantly measured, cleaned, balanced, and returned. Carbon dioxide from human lungs would be captured. Some of it would feed plants. Some would pass through machines that separate and recycle it. Oxygen would come from several systems working together. Mechanical generators, emergency reserves, algae, crops, and green spaces designed not only for beauty, but for breathing. No single system would be trusted completely. A ship crossing interstellar space cannot depend on one answer. It needs layers. Plants, machines, stored oxygen, chemical scrubbers, backup filters, emergency shelters. Redundancy would be sacred. Most passengers would not think about this every moment. They would simply wake, breathe, speak, laugh, and sleep. But every child would learn early that air is not free. The ship makes it. The ship shares it. The ship protects it. On a mothership, breathing is a reminder that no one is truly separate. The oxygen in one person's lungs may have passed through leaves a few days before. The carbon dioxide from a sleeping child may help grow herbs in a kitchen garden. The air moving through a classroom may carry the invisible work of algae, pumps, filters, and roots. The ship turns every breath into a relationship. Water would be even more sacred. At launch, the fleet would carry vast reserves of water, some for drinking, cooking, washing, farming, medicine, and industry. Some stored around protected sections of the ship as shielding against radiation. Some sealed away as emergency reserves, never touched unless the future becomes desperate. But no amount of stored water is enough for centuries unless the ship can return it to itself. So water would move in endless loops, from showers to filters, from humidity to condensers, from urine to purification systems, from farms to recovery tanks, from breath to the air, from air to cold surfaces, from surfaces back into pipes. A glass of water given to a child in the 5th generation may contain molecules once drunk by an engineer who helped build the ship in orbit. It may have passed through a tomato plant, a cooling system, a medical room, a cloud of vapor above a public bath, and the roots of a tree in the memorial garden. At first, that thought might feel strange. Later, it might become beautiful. Because in a closed world, purity does not mean untouched. Purity means safely returned. Children might grow up with songs about water, not because the ship is poetic, but because memory helps survival. They would learn never to waste it, never to ignore a leak, never to take for granted the quiet sound of pipes behind the walls. Some nights, parents might tell stories about rain. Real rain. Water falling from a sky no machine controlled. To shipborne children, this may sound impossible. They know misting systems in farms. They know condensation. They know scheduled humidity. But water falling freely from clouds over forests, roads, oceans, and open hands might feel almost mythical. Food would be the third great cycle. The fleet could carry stored meals for emergencies, but no generation ship could live on storage alone. It would need farms that can grow, fail, recover, and grow again. The agricultural decks would not look like old farms on Earth. There would be no endless wheat fields under open sky. Instead, food would rise in layers. Hydroponic towers, root beds, algae tubes, glowing softly behind glass. Mushroom chambers in warm darkness. Small orchards under artificial dawn. Herbs growing near communal kitchens. Carefully managed soil gardens where children learn that dirt is alive. The first crops would be chosen for survival. Fast-growing greens, grains, legumes, tubers, algae, fungi. Plants that turn light, water, minerals, and care into calories efficiently. But human beings would ask for more than efficiency. Someone would want strawberries. Someone would want tea. Someone would want chili peppers. Someone would ask for flowers near the maternity ward. Someone would argue that a fruit tree is worth the space because children need to know what sweetness from a branch feels like. These debates would matter because a generation ship must decide what a human life requires. If the answer is only calories, then the ship may survive physically and still become poor in spirit. Food is not only nutrition, it is memory, culture, comfort, celebration, and identity. So there would be meals that carry Earth inside them. Old recipes adapted to new ingredients, festival dishes prepared from ship-grown crops, bread made from grain raised under artificial light, soup flavored with herbs grown in recycled water, a piece of fruit shared slowly because everyone knows how much care it required. The ship would feed the body, but it would also feed remembrance. Waste would be the least beautiful cycle, and perhaps the most important. On Earth, waste can be hidden, burned, buried, dumped, washed away, or sent somewhere else. On a mothership, there is no somewhere else. Food scraps would become compost, nutrient solution, or fuel. Human waste would be processed, sterilized, broken down, and returned safely to agriculture. Metals would be recovered, plastics would be remade, fabric would be recycled, broken tools would be stripped for useful parts. Even dust would matter. Dust can clog filters. Dust can carry microbes. Dust can reveal slow wear in a machine. Nothing is too small to notice when a world is sealed. There would be technicians whose work most passengers rarely see, but whose knowledge keeps everyone alive. They would know the sound of a healthy pump, the smell of a stable compost reactor, the color of nutrient water when something is slightly wrong. They might not be celebrated like pilots. But without them, the ship dies. Over generations, perhaps the fleet would learn to honor this work properly. Children would visit recycling decks, not as punishment, but as education. They would learn that waste is not shameful. Waste is unfinished life. Even death would return to the cycle. This would be difficult for the first generation. On Earth, burial and cremation carry ancient meanings, but aboard a closed world, the elements of the body cannot be removed from life forever. Water, carbon, minerals, nitrogen, phosphorus, all of it is too precious. So the fleet would develop new rituals. Gentle ones. A body might be processed with dignity, and its recovered elements returned to memorial groves or protected gardens. A family might choose a tree, a flower bed, or a quiet green room where the person's name is recorded. To later generations, this may not feel cold. It may feel comforting. No one truly leaves the ship. They become part of its breath, its leaves, its water, its future. This is what the closed world teaches. That life is not separate from the systems that hold it. On Earth, this was always true, but Earth was large enough to hide it. The ship is too small to lie. And of course, the cycles would not always work perfectly. A filter could clog. A crop could weaken. A fungus could spread. A water sensor could fail. A recycling chamber could fall out of balance. A trace chemical could appear where no one expected it. The ship would survive not because it is flawless, but because it notices. Sensors notice. Technicians notice. Farmers notice. Doctors notice. Children are taught to notice. A generation ship is a civilization of attention. And in the quiet hours, when most of the habitat sleeps, the cycles continue. Water moves through pipes like hidden rivers. Air passes through leaves and filters. Microbes work in darkness. Plants open slowly beneath artificial dawn. Machines hum, measure, adjust, and begin again. Outside, there is no ocean waiting to rescue them. No forest beyond the hull. No rain cloud gathering over distant hills. Only the dark between stars. So the fleet must carry Earth's oldest lesson inside itself. Life survives by returning. Again and again. Breath into leaves. Waste into soil. Water into water. Death into memory. Memory into children. Children into the future. And as the mother ships move farther from the sun, every closed world keeps practicing the same quiet miracle. Nothing disappears. Everything becomes part of the journey. A generation ship does not only travel through space. It travels through families, through births, through names, through bloodlines, through children who inherit a journey they did not choose, and one day pass it to children of their own. The people who leave Earth will not be the people who arrive. That is the strange truth at the center of the voyage. The first passengers may see the engines ignite. They may watch Earth grow smaller behind them. They may remember real sunlight, real wind, real rain. But most of them will never see the destination star up close. Their children may not see it either, or their grandchildren. For a fleet moving slowly between stars, arrival belongs to the future, and the future must be born carefully. This makes biology one of the most important systems aboard the fleet, as important as air, as important as water, as important as engines. A ship can repair metal, it can regrow crops, it can recycle waste, it can rebuild damaged sections from stored materials and patient labor. But if it fails to carry healthy human generations forward, then the voyage becomes only a machine moving through darkness. A perfect ship, with no one left to inherit it. That is why every mothership would carry more than its living passengers. Deep inside the protected central spine, behind layers of radiation shielding, there would be genetic archives, frozen embryos, stored sperm and eggs, DNA records, medical histories, tissue samples, biological material from people who never boarded the ships, but whose genetic legacy was chosen to travel. The archive would be quiet, cold, and heavily protected. Not a place of daily life, a place of sleeping possibility. Most people would rarely see it. Children might learn about it in school as one of the ship's sacred responsibilities. Adults might think of it only during medical planning, family counseling, or moments of crisis, but it would always be there, like a second population waiting in silence. Not to replace the living, to protect them from becoming too narrow. 25,000 people on each mothership is a strong beginning. Across 10 ships, the fleet begins with a large and diverse human population. This is not a tiny lifeboat trying to rebuild humanity from a handful of survivors. It is a planned civilization. But time is powerful. Centuries can change even large populations. Families form patterns. People fall in love within familiar communities. Some districts become more isolated than expected. Some family lines grow quickly, while others fade. One ship may experience lower fertility for several generations. Another may have a baby boom. A third may lose part of its population during a crisis. The danger may not arrive as disaster. It may arrive slowly. A narrowing of genetic diversity, an aging population, too few children in one generation, too few trained people in the next, a hidden illness appearing more often over time. This is the genetic clock. It does not tick loudly. It moves beneath weddings, births, funerals, school lessons, migration records, and quiet family dinners. It asks the same question again and again. Is humanity still broad enough to continue? The fleet would have to answer carefully, not coldly, carefully. There would be doctors, genetic counselors, ethicists, population planners, family representatives, and ship councils. They would not be there to turn love into mathematics. That would break the spirit of the mission. They would be there to help families understand the long consequences of living inside a sealed world. On Earth, having a child is deeply personal. On a generation ship, it would still be personal. A child would still be loved first by parents, grandparents, siblings, friends. A child would still be a voice, a face, a laugh, a life. But every birth would also touch the ship. Air, food, water, schools, medicine, housing, the age balance of the population. The skills needed 50 years from now. Inside a closed world, family is private, but never completely separate from the future. This would create tension. Some people would accept the planning as necessary. Others would resent it. Some couples might be asked to wait before having another child. Some families might be encouraged to have children because their ship needs a stronger next generation. Some young people might feel that too much of their life is being measured by systems built before they were born. These conflicts would be real. A believable fleet cannot be perfect. People would argue. They would demand freedom. They would question councils. They would ask whether survival is worth it if every generation must live under the shadow of the mission. And those questions would matter. Because a civilization that cannot question itself may survive mechanically, but not humanly. The fleet would need a language softer than control. Stewardship. That word might become one of the most important words aboard the ships. To steward something means you do not fully own it. You care for it while it passes through your hands. The first generation stewards the fleet for the second for the third for children who may wake beneath a different sun. Population planning would have to be built around that idea. Not command, consent, education, trust, shared responsibility. And because this is a fleet, there would be another solution that a single ship could never offer. Movement. People could move between motherships. Not every day, not casually, but enough to matter. A family from Ship 2 might relocate to Ship 7. A young engineer from Ship 5 might marry a teacher from Ship 9. A doctor trained on Ship 1 might spend 20 years serving on Ship 4. Children born from families of two different ships might grow up carrying both cultures inside them. These movements would help the fleet stay open, biologically and culturally. The small transfer vessels would become bridges in the human genome, tiny ships moving through blackness, carrying not only passengers, but new possibilities for the entire civilization. A migration might be celebrated like a major life event. A family leaving one mothership could receive soil from its garden, recordings from its neighborhood, and messages from friends. When they arrive at the new ship, they might be welcomed with a ceremony beneath a different artificial sky, because leaving a mothership would feel, in some ways, like leaving a planet. It is the place where gravity first held you, where your parents' voices echoed in corridors, where you learned the smell of the farms, where every turn in the hallway felt familiar. To move to another ship would require courage. But the fleet would need people with that courage. People willing to become bridges. The genetic archive would also help, but it would have to be used with great care. A child born from stored genetic material could never be treated as a tool for diversity. That child would need a family, a story, a place to belong. Perhaps some children would grow up knowing that part of their origin slept in the archive for hundreds of years. They might visit the vault when they are old enough. They might read about ancestors from Earth whose bodies never traveled, but whose possibility did. They might feel strange, or proud, or both. Identity aboard the fleet would become layered. A person could belong to a family, to a district, to a mothership, to the fleet, to Earth, and to a star they had not yet reached. Over generations, those layers would shift. The first passengers may call themselves Earthborn. Their children may call themselves Voyagers. Later generations may identify more strongly with their ship than with a planet they never saw. This could be beautiful and dangerous. If one ship becomes too proud, too isolated, too certain that it alone carries the right way to live, the fleet could begin to fracture. That is why movement, shared education, intership families, common stories, and common ceremonies would matter so much. Every child might learn the same phrase. No ship carries humanity alone. Simple words. But in the dark between stars, simple words can become anchors. And still, behind all the planning, all the archives, all the charts and councils, there would be something much softer. A newborn opening their eyes in a maternity ward under artificial flowers. A parent crying quietly. A nurse recording the birth. A message sent through the ship, then across the fleet. Another life has joined the voyage. Outside, the destination is still distant. The stars remain cold and silent. But inside the mothership, the future has arrived again, small enough to hold, and important enough to cross the darkness for. Between the motherships, there would be darkness. Not the soft darkness of night on Earth, where morning is always waiting somewhere beyond the horizon. This would be deeper, colder, almost perfectly silent. The fleet would not travel as one tight cluster. That would be too dangerous. At interstellar speed, even a small mistake could become fatal. The motherships would need distance between them. Thousands, perhaps tens of thousands of kilometers. Enough space to protect one another from collision, debris, or sudden system failure. From the outside, they might look like a loose constellation. 10 slow lights moving together through the black. Each one a world. Each one a city. Each one carrying gardens, children, hospitals, archives, and the quiet breath of human life. To someone standing inside one ship, the others might appear as bright points in the observatory glass. Artificial stars traveling with them, not close enough to touch, not close enough to visit casually, but close enough to know they are not alone. A child might point through the window and ask, "Which one is Lantern?" And a parent might answer, "That one, the gold light near the edge." Somewhere inside that distant light, another child may be asking the same question in return. That knowledge would matter, because in the space between stars, loneliness would not only be emotional, it would be physical. The ships would be surrounded by an emptiness so wide that even the other mother ships would feel impossibly far away. And yet, sometimes, the distance between them would be crossed. This would be the work of the small ships, transfer vessels, shuttles, intership craft. They would not be grand like the mother ships. They would not carry forests, schools, rivers of air, or entire neighborhoods. They would be compact, shielded, practical vessels built for one purpose: to move safely between the giants. Most of the time, they would sleep in docking bays, waiting. Maintained by crews, checked by machines, protected behind thick doors, ready for the day someone or something needs to cross the dark. A shuttle might carry doctors to a ship with a medical emergency, or engineers to repair a failing system, or teachers sent for a year of exchange, or seeds from one agricultural deck to another, or a family beginning a new life under a different artificial sky. It might carry replacement filters, soil microbes, medicine, frozen embryos, data cores, musical instruments, children visiting another mothership for the first time. The cargo may seem small, but inside a fleet, small things can hold civilization together. A box of seeds can save a harvest. A doctor can save a generation. A family can widen a bloodline. A song can move from one ship to another and become part of the fleet's memory. Traveling by shuttle would not be casual. No one would simply decide to visit another mothership for the weekend. Every transfer would be planned, checked, approved, and timed carefully. Health scans, cargo inspections, radiation forecasts, docking windows, backup routes, emergency shelters. The journey might last hours or days, but emotionally, it would feel much larger. For a person born on one mothership, leaving it would be the closest thing to leaving a planet. Imagine a young woman from Ship 3. All her life, Ship 3 has been home. Its gravity is the only gravity she knows. Its farms carry the smell of her childhood. Its corridors are familiar enough to walk in half sleep. Its morning lights, its festivals, its public gardens, its quiet maintenance hum, all of it feels natural to her. She has seen the other ships in videos. She has spoken to people from them through screens. She knows the fleet is real. But knowing is different from leaving. On the day of transfer, her family gathers near the docking hub. There are practical instructions, soft jokes, and long silences. Her mother gives her a small packet of seeds from the community garden. Her father tells her to rest during the coast phase, because advice is easier than goodbye. Then the doors close. The shuttle releases. For the first time in her life, she sees her world from the outside. Ship 3 turns slowly behind her, enormous and fragile, glowing against the black. She can see the ring where she was born, the lights of the farming decks, the shielded spine, the docking arms, the small golden curve of the habitat that once felt endless. Only now does she understand. Her world is a vessel, a made thing, something that can be lost. And ahead, far away, another mothership is growing brighter. This is what the small ships would give people. Perspective. They would remind each generation that their ship is not the whole of humanity. There are other voices in the dark, other gardens, other schools, other accents, other ways of remembering Earth. Over centuries, each mothership would develop its own personality. One might be known for music, another for medicine, another for farming, another for engineering, another for its libraries and quiet halls of memory. Without transfer vessels, those differences could become walls. With them, they become gifts. A farming method discovered on one ship could spread to the others. A lullaby written in one habitat could be sung in another maternity ward decades later. A child from one ship could grow up, marry someone from another, and raise a family that belongs to both. Movement would keep the fleet open. Biologically, culturally, emotionally, and in emergencies, the shuttles would become lifelines. If one mothership suffers crop failure, the others can send seeds, microbes, and specialists. If a disease outbreak forces part of a district into quarantine, children or medical patients can be moved to safer spaces. If a shield is damaged, engineers can cross the dark with replacement systems. If a community begins to fracture under pressure, migration may give people room to begin again. A single ship in trouble faces the universe alone. A ship in a fleet can call for help. And sometimes, far away, help appears as a tiny moving light. There may even be a rite of passage built around these journeys. At a certain age, every child might visit another mothership, not as tourists, but as students of the fleet. They would study the ship before they go, its history, its gardens, its customs, its major crises, its songs. Then the day would come. The shuttle would undock. Their home would shrink behind them, and for the first time, they would see that the place they thought was the world is only one light among many. When they return, they would still belong to their own ship. But something inside them would be wider. They would understand the phrase every child is taught. No ship carries humanity alone. In the deep dark between stars, the small vessels would be easy to overlook. They are not as majestic as the mother ships, not as powerful as the engines, not as mysterious as the destination star. But they may be the reason the fleet remains a civilization, because life is not held together only by walls, farms, and machines. It is held together by connection, by movement, by the knowledge that somewhere beyond your own window, beyond your own artificial sky, another human world is turning in the dark, and a small ship can still cross the silence between you. After the fleet passes the outer planets, the sun begins to change. Not in reality. The sun is still the same star, still burning as it always has. But to the people aboard the mother ships, it slowly becomes smaller, colder, and more distant. At first, families still visit the rear observatories to see it. Children are shown the bright point and told, "That is the star Earth still circles." Elders stand there longer than anyone else, remembering real daylight on their skin. But year after year, the sun shrinks. Jupiter becomes history, Saturn becomes a lesson, Neptune becomes a milestone, the Kuiper Belt fades behind them. And then, at last, the fleet enters the true dark between stars. This is the part of interstellar travel that the imagination often skips. We picture departure, we picture arrival, we picture a new sun rising over a new world. But between those moments lies almost everything. The space between stars is not like an ocean, though we often call it one. Oceans have waves, storms, wind, salt, birds, and horizons. Oceans move beneath ships. They make sound. The dark between stars gives almost nothing back. No wind, no weather, no horizon, no sunrise, no sense of speed. Even if the fleet is moving faster than any human city has ever moved, the passengers may feel still. The stars do not rush past the windows. The destination does not grow larger from one day to the next. The journey is real, but the human body cannot feel it. This would become one of the quiet psychological challenges of the voyage. To be moving every second, and yet feel suspended. A child born in the middle generations might look through an observatory window and see what their grandparents saw, and what their grandchildren may also see: a black sky, cold stars, and the same distant point that everyone calls the destination. The fleet would need rituals to make progress visible. Perhaps every year, the central plazas display a map of distance traveled. Perhaps every decade, the children carry small lights from a symbol of the sun to a symbol of the new star. Perhaps the midpoint of the journey becomes a sacred holiday, even though nothing outside the hull appears to change. Humans need signs. Without them, even a great journey can feel like waiting. But the dark would not only challenge the mind, it would challenge the ships themselves. Interstellar space is almost empty, but not completely. There are thin atoms scattered through the void, charged particles, cosmic rays, dust grains too small to see, ancient radiation from violent events far beyond the fleet's path. At low speed, these things are dangerous. At interstellar speed, they become serious. A grain of dust, harmless on Earth, could strike a shield with the force of a weapon. A high-energy particle could damage electronics, seeds, embryos or living cells. Radiation would slowly test every layer of protection the builders had placed around the habitats. So the motherships would travel with their strongest shields facing forward. Thick protective layers, sacrificial plates, water barriers, magnetic systems perhaps. Drones ready to inspect the hull, sensors watching the darkness ahead. After a century, the ships would no longer look new. Their forward shields would be scarred, darkened, patched, and layered with repairs. Each mark would be a small memory of something invisible that touched them in the night. Space would not be attacking. That is important. The universe is not angry. It does not hate the ships. It does not know that children sleep behind the walls, or that gardens breathe under artificial dawns. It simply does not care. And that may be more frightening than hostility. The danger of deep space is not cruelty. It is indifference. On Earth, even storms feel alive. Thunder speaks. Rain strikes the roof. Wind pushes against windows. But in interstellar space, danger often arrives without sound, without warning, without meaning. A radiation spike, a shield impact, a slow leak, a sensor failure, a material weakening after decades of stress. Most of these problems would be handled quietly. A maintenance team wakes. A drone leaves its bay. A section seals itself. A patch is printed and installed. A calm announcement reaches the habitat in the morning cycle. No panic. A civilization cannot live for centuries in panic. The ship must teach people to respect danger without worshiping it. Children would learn emergency routes the way Earth children once learned fire drills. They would know where the radiation shelters are. They would know why some doors must never be forced open. They would learn that the hull is not simply a wall, but an active border between life and everything that does not protect life. Some would grow up fascinated by that border. They would become shield engineers, hull technicians, radiation doctors, sensor pilots, and repair drone operators. Others would prefer the gardens, schools, kitchens, music halls, and quiet districts where the ship feels almost ordinary. The fleet would need both kinds of people, those who stare into danger and those who preserve tenderness inside it. The dark would create another danger too, forgetting. Not forgetting data. The archives would remain full. Earth would be recorded in images, books, maps, songs, languages, and histories. But living memory fades differently. The first generation remembers Earth as a place. The second remembers it as their parents' longing. The third remembers it as story. After that, Earth may become many things at once, sacred to some, distant to others, heavy to a few. Some may say the fleet must preserve Earth exactly. Others may say the ships have become their own worlds now. The middle generations would carry the hardest burden. They did not choose departure. They may not live to see arrival. They inherit duty without receiving the beginning or the ending. So the fleet must give them more than responsibility. It must give them life, art, love, work that matters, new traditions, the right to change the ship, the right to become more than caretakers of someone else's dream. Because a fleet that only preserves the past will become a museum. And a museum cannot cross the stars. The ships must remember Earth, but they must also grow beyond it. Outside, the darkness remains almost unchanged. Inside, humanity changes because it is alive. New accents form. New songs are written. New festivals mark events that happened entirely in space. Children draw home, not as a blue planet, but as a ring of light turning in the dark. And still, the fleet continues. A baby sleeps through a radiation drill. A teacher explains why the sun is now only a star behind them. A technician repairs a shield panel no passenger will ever see. A family watches another mothership glowing far away and feels less alone. This is how humanity answers the dark. Not with conquest, not with noise, but with care. Care for air, care for water, care for children, care for memory, care for machines growing old around them, care for other ships shining across the silence. The universe may be vast beyond mercy. But life does not need the universe to be merciful. Life only needs small places where mercy is made. A clean breath, a warm room, a garden under artificial morning, a message from another ship, a child learning the name of the star they may one day reach. And so the fleet moves on. 10 fragile worlds crossing an ocean without waves. Scarred, watchful, changing, alive. And in the great silence between suns, that may be the most extraordinary thing of all. The first sign is not an explosion. There is no fire tearing through the habitat, no screaming alarm, no sudden collapse of the lights, no dramatic rupture in the hull. At first, it is only a color, a pale yellow spreading across the leaves in one section of Ship 4's agricultural ring. The farmers notice it before anyone else. They notice because farmers always notice. Even aboard a vessel crossing the dark between stars, farming is still an act of attention. The angle of a leaf, the smell of soil, the way water sits around roots. The slight change in growth that no sensor fully understands until a human hand reaches down and touches the plant. At first, the problem seems small. One bed of greens is isolated, then another. Then a row of dwarf grain begins to weaken. Nutrient levels are checked. Water chemistry is adjusted. Light cycles are reviewed. Microbial samples are taken from the soil. For a few days, the reports remain calm. Then the pattern spreads. Not quickly. That is what makes it frightening. A fast disaster is terrifying, but at least it tells you what it is. A slow disaster asks you to wait while it becomes clearer. It turns every morning into a question. Will the leaves be worse today? On Ship 4, the agricultural ring is not just a place where food grows. It is part of the atmosphere, part of the water cycle, part of the mental health of the ship. Families walk there during evening cycle. Children learn botany there. Elders sit near the herb walls because the smell reminds them of old earth gardens they never saw. Now, entire sections are sealed behind transparent barriers. People still walk past them, but more quietly. Inside, technicians in clean suits move among the plants. Drones drift above the beds. Samples are carried to laboratories. Data moves through the ship faster than rumor, but rumor follows close behind. A fungal strain, perhaps, a microbial imbalance, a mutation in one of the soil cultures, a hidden failure in the nutrient recovery system. No one knows yet. And not knowing is its own kind of darkness. The ship council makes an announcement during the morning cycle. The voice is calm, almost too calm. There is an agricultural irregularity in Ring Section 14. Food reserves remain stable. No immediate danger to passengers. Movement through affected zones is restricted. Additional support has been requested from the fleet. Those last words matter most. Additional support has been requested from the fleet. Because Ship 4 is not alone. Within minutes, the other motherships receive the full report. Not the public version, but the deep one. Crop data, atmospheric changes, microbial scans, water chemistry, seed histories, sensor logs, and images of the yellowing leaves. On Ship 2, plant pathologists wake before their scheduled shift. On Ship 6, reserve seed banks are reviewed. On Ship 8, an ecology team compares the pattern to a problem they solved 80 years earlier. On Ship 9, medical staff prepare to receive children and elderly passengers if part of Ship 4 must reduce its population temporarily. No one panics. The fleet has practiced this. But practice does not remove fear. On Ship 4, a girl named Mara watches her parents pack 2 small bags. Her younger brother keeps asking whether they are leaving forever. Her mother says no. Her father says they are only moving to Ship 9 for a while, until the gardens recover. Mara does not answer. She has never left Ship 4. To her, Ship 4 is not one ship among many. It is the shape of home. Its gravity, its lights, its corridors, its morning announcements, the sound of its water systems at night. All of it is part of her body's understanding of the world. Now she is told that another world is waiting. Another mothership. Another artificial sky. A transfer vessel docks 12 hours later. It carries specialists from Ship 2, soil cultures from Ship 8, replacement filters from Ship 6, and return capacity for several hundred passengers from the affected districts. The shuttle is small compared to the mothership, but when it appears in the docking cameras, people gather near public screens to watch. A tiny light crossing the dark. A promise made visible. The repair effort begins quietly. No heroic speeches. No grand music. Just work. Scientists trace the infection through root systems. Engineers open the nutrient loops and search for the hidden weakness. Farmers remove contaminated beds with the care of surgeons. Robots sterilize tools. Reserve crops are moved from sealed storage. The affected air handling systems are separated from the rest of the ring. Every action has consequences. Remove too much soil, and the recovery may take years. Sterilize too aggressively, and good microbes die with the bad. Delay too long, and the infection may spread. Move too many people, and the receiving ships strain. A generation ship is a world of balance. Even rescue must be balanced. For the passengers transferred to Ship 9, the journey is short by the standards of space, but enormous by the standards of the heart. Mara sits beside her brother in the shuttle, hands folded tightly in her lap. Through the narrow window, Ship 4 shrinks behind them. For the first time, she sees it whole. A glowing ring in the dark. Fragile. Beautiful. Not endless. She wants to look away, but she cannot. Ahead, Ship 9 grows brighter. Its docking lights are different. Its hull markings are different. Even its radio greetings sound strange. When the shuttle attaches and the doors open, the air carries an unfamiliar scent, cleaner, colder, with a faint trace of pine from the receiving garden. People are waiting. Not strangers exactly. Fleet citizens. They bring blankets, directions, warm food, and soft voices. Children from Ship 9 stand behind their parents, staring curiously at the new arrivals from Ship 4. For a moment, no one knows what to say. Then Mara's brother asks if their trees are real. A child from Ship 9 says yes. And just like that, the distance becomes smaller. Back on Ship 4, the agricultural crisis continues for weeks, then months. Some crops are lost completely. One section of the ring must be stripped down and rebuilt from the structural floor up. The memorial herb garden is closed, and people leave messages outside the barrier. Not because the plants were rare, but because people had tied memory to them. This is what outsiders might not understand. On a generation ship, losing a garden is not only losing food, it is losing a piece of emotional weather. The fleet helps replace both. Ship 5 sends archived recordings of old Earth forests to be played in temporary gathering rooms. Ship 7 shares a school program about ecological recovery, helping children understand that sick systems can heal. Ship 2's botanists work side by side with Ship 4's farmers until the first new root beds are stable. Slowly, the yellowing stops. A new microbial balance is introduced. Water chemistry stabilizes. The reserve crops take hold. The sealed sections open one by one. The first green shoots in the rebuilt ring are treated almost like a birth. People come to see them in small groups. They speak softly, as if loud voices might frighten the plants. Mara watches from Ship 9 on a public screen, months older now, standing beside friends she did not have before. She sees her father in the crowd on Ship 4. He is crying, not from sadness, from relief. Eventually, Mara's family returns home, but they do not return unchanged. They bring new recipes from Ship 9, new words, new friendships. A packet of pine seeds gifted by the receiving garden. Her brother now speaks of Ship 9 as if it is not foreign, but part of the same extended home. And Ship 4 is changed too. Its farms are stronger, its systems are better understood, its people are humbler. The crisis becomes part of the fleet's shared memory, taught in schools across all 10 vessels. Not as a story of failure, as a story of why the fleet exists. Because one ship can become sick, one ecosystem can falter, one world can lose its balance. But if there are other worlds nearby, if there are other hands, other seeds, other minds, other rooms waiting in the dark, then failure does not have to become an ending. It can become a wound. And wounds can heal. Years later, when the rebuilt agricultural ring is fully alive again, a small grove grows near its entrance. It is made from seeds sent by the other ships during the crisis. Each tree has a small marker showing where it came from. Dawn, Lantern, Archive, Ship 9, Ship 2, Ship 8. Children play beneath them without thinking too much about the names. That is how recovery becomes normal. That is how help becomes history. And that is how a fleet survives the dark. Not by avoiding every failure. No civilization can do that. But by making sure that when one light begins to dim, the others move closer. For most of the voyage, the destination is only a point of light, a number in navigation systems, a name in classrooms, a bright mark on old star charts, a promise repeated so often that some people believe in it like faith, while others quietly wonder if it will ever feel real. Children learn its position before they understand distance. Teachers point to it in the observatories and say, "That is where we are going." But for generations, it does not look like a place. It looks like any other star. Cold, remote, untouchable. Then, slowly, almost too slowly for the human heart to notice, it begins to change. The instruments notice first. A slight increase in brightness, a clearer measurement of planets, a sharper separation between the main stars of the system, a change in the way the forward telescopes speak about the future. The destination is no longer only a coordinate. It is becoming a neighborhood. Across the fleet, scientists begin releasing new images. Not the old renderings from Earth, not simulations created before departure. Real images, gathered by the ships themselves after centuries of travel. A star with planets, dust belts, orbital patterns, possible moons, cold outer bodies. Maybe a rocky world in the region where liquid water could exist. Maybe not a second Earth, but something that can be studied, used, orbited, and one day touched. The fleet grows quieter during this period, not silent. Life continues. People still eat, sleep, repair systems, teach children, fall in love, complain about schedules, celebrate birthdays, and argue in council meetings. But underneath everything, there is a new feeling, a pressure of arrival. After centuries of invisible progress, the journey is finally becoming visible. The forward observatories are crowded every evening cycle. Families wait for their turn. Children press close to the glass. Elders sit in reserved seats, some too old to stand for long, but unwilling to miss even one updated image. The destination star is still far away, but it is no longer just a star. It is a sun, waiting to become near. For the first time in many generations, the people of the fleet begin to imagine shadows cast by a natural light they have never known. Not lamplight, not sky panels, not a controlled artificial dawn. Real sunlight from another star. The engines that carried the fleet through the long dark now begin the hardest part of the journey, slowing down. Departure was difficult, but departure happened with the sun behind them and Earth still near enough to be remembered as a place. Arrival is different. The ships are older now. Their shields are scarred. Their systems have been repaired and rebuilt many times. Their cultures have changed. Their passengers are descendants of descendants. The people who first left Earth are gone. The builders are gone. The Earthborn are gone. Even the early shipborne generations are names in archives, faces in recordings, voices played during ceremonies. But the fleet remains, and now it must do something delicate. It must not rush toward the new system. A generation ship cannot arrive like a falling stone. It must break over years, perhaps decades. Engines fire in long, careful patterns. The ships adjust formation. Smaller probes are sent ahead. Telescopes map radiation, dust, planetary atmospheres, magnetic fields, asteroid belts, and possible resources. The first rule of arrival is patience. The fleet has crossed light years. It must not become careless in the final fraction. There is no guarantee that the new system will be welcoming. The rocky planet everyone hoped for may have no breathable air. Its atmosphere may be too thin. Its star may flare too violently. Its surface may be frozen, scorched, poisonous, or unstable. Its oceans, if they exist, may be locked beneath ice. Its sky may be beautiful and deadly. For centuries, the people of the fleet have dreamed of a new Earth. But the universe does not owe them one. This truth is spoken gently in schools and public briefings. Arrival does not mean landing. Arrival means choices. Perhaps they will build orbital habitats first. Perhaps they will mine asteroids. Perhaps they will settle moons. Perhaps they will send only robots to the planet for decades. Perhaps the motherships themselves will remain the first homes of the new civilization. This is not failure. It may be wisdom. Because the fleet was never only searching for a place exactly like Earth, it was learning how to carry Earth's living systems with it. Air, water, soil, seeds, memory, language, care. If the new planet is not ready, the fleet can wait. It has always been waiting. One evening, long after the braking phase begins, the forward observatories show something that changes the mood of every ship. A planet, not as a point, as a small disk. Still blurred, still distant, still wrapped in uncertainty, but round, real, and lit by the star they have crossed the dark to reach. Across all 10 mother ships, the image appears in public halls. People stop working. Conversations fade. In farms, technicians stand between rows of plants and stare at wall screens. In schools, children fall silent. In medical wards, patients turn their heads toward the display. In the central archives, historians begin recording the moment before anyone tells them to. No one knows yet whether the planet can hold them. No one knows whether its ground will ever feel footsteps. But for the first time, the destination has a shape. A child on Ship 9 whispers, "Is that ours?" And an old teacher answers after a long pause, "Not yet." The answer is perfect. Not yet. Because nothing in this journey has ever been given all at once. Earth was not left in a day. The ships were not built in a year. The fleet did not cross the stars in a lifetime. A new world will not become home simply because humans have arrived near it. Home must be learned. Carefully. The first probes enter the system years before the motherships settle into stable orbits. They are small, fast, and expendable, though the people watching them do not think of them that way. Each one carries centuries of longing in its instruments. They fly past moons. They map minerals. They taste atmospheres. They listen for storms. They watch the star. They search for water, carbon, nitrogen, metals, safe orbits, and danger. Every discovery becomes news across the fleet. A frozen moon with subsurface ice, an asteroid belt rich in metals, a planet with clouds, but uncertain chemistry, a smaller rocky world too hot for life, but useful for mining, a distant outer region filled with icy bodies that could feed future habitats. The system is not paradise, but it is not empty. And after the long dark, even resources feel like welcome. The fleet begins to spread, slowly. Some motherships move toward high orbit around the most promising planet. Others remain near asteroid resources. Manufacturing vessels detach from docking hubs. Survey craft multiply. New construction platforms unfold, like seeds opening in sunlight. The motherships are no longer only vehicles. They become the first cities of the new system. The first generation after arrival may still live mostly inside them, perhaps the second too. Children may still be born under artificial skies. Farms may still glow beneath controlled lamps. Water may still move through pipes instead of rivers. But now, outside the windows, the dark has changed. There is a nearby sun. There are worlds. There are horizons waiting to be studied. And one day, perhaps, a human being will descend, not as an invader, not as a conqueror, but as a descendant of travelers who spent centuries learning that life survives only when it respects the systems that hold it. The first landing would be quiet. A small crew, a careful sight, a sky no human lungs can breathe yet, a horizon no human eye has ever seen directly. When the lander touches the surface, no crowd can stand outside to cheer. The applause is far away, inside orbiting ships, delayed by communication, carried through halls where people watch with hands over their mouths. The crew steps down. Their boots touch another world. For a moment, nothing happens. No music from the planet, no welcome, no sign that the universe understands the importance of the moment. Only dust. No light, rock, a new sun above an unfamiliar horizon. And then a voice speaks from the surface. We are here. Across the fleet, people weep. Not because the journey is over, because it has changed form. The crossing is finished. The becoming has begun. The fleet did not arrive as a single ship of survivors. It arrived as a civilization, scarred by the dark, strengthened by connection, carrying forests in rings of metal, carrying oceans in tanks and pipes, carrying the dead in memorial groves, carrying languages, seeds, songs, and children who know Earth only as a blue light in history. And now, under another sun, humanity must learn a new kind of patience. How to build without destroying, how to settle without forgetting, how to become native to a place no human was born from. Behind them, Earth is too far away to be seen. Ahead of them, the new system waits, not as a gift, as a responsibility. And as the motherships turn slowly in orbit, their old hulls shining in the light of a star their ancestors chose but never reached, a child looks out from a habitat window and sees something no generation before them ever saw. Not the endless black between stars. Not a destination point, but a world below, real, silent, unfamiliar, waiting. And for the first time in centuries, the word future no longer points only forward. It points down. The journey does not end with arrival. Not really. A ship can reach a star. A fleet can enter orbit. A lander can touch a new world. A human voice can speak from beneath an unfamiliar sky and say, We are here. But home is not made in a single moment. Home is made slowly. It is made by the first shelter that survives the night, the first crop that grows in foreign soil, the first child who learns the name of a new horizon, the first grave marked beneath another sun, the first song written for a place Earth never knew. For centuries, the fleet had been moving toward the new system. Now, the new system begins moving into the fleet. Its light enters the habitat windows. Its minerals enter the factories. Its ice becomes water. Its dust is studied, filtered, and named. Its planets appear in children's drawings beside the old blue world of Earth. At first, most people still live aboard the motherships. That is where the air is safe, where the farms are stable, where schools, hospitals, archives, and families already know how to exist. The ships remain the true cities of humanity for a long time. But slowly, life begins to spread. Construction platforms grow in orbit. Mining stations open among asteroids. Robotic greenhouses are tested on cold moons. Small research bases appear on the surface of the most promising world. Habitats are built from local stone, metal, ice, and patience. The fleet becomes more than transport. It becomes a seed. Each mothership carries a different part of the old journey into the new age. One becomes a library. One becomes a medical center. One becomes an orbital farm. One becomes a training world for children who will one day live below. One remains mostly unchanged, preserved as a memorial to the crossing. People visit its old corridors in silence. They touch the walls. They read the names. They stand beneath the artificial sky and remember that this was once the only sky their ancestors had. The ships are old now, scarred by dust, patched by generations of repair, filled with stories too numerous for any archive to fully hold. But they are not relics. Not yet. They still breathe. They still turn. They still hold gardens, water, memory, and sleep. And somewhere inside one of them, a child stands at a window. Behind the child is the warm light of the habitat ring, the soft hum of air systems, the smell of leaves, the sound of distant footsteps. A world built by people who refuse to let life end at the edge of one solar system. Ahead, beyond the glass, a new sun shines. Below, a planet turns slowly. It is not Earth. Its continents are different. Its clouds move differently. Its colors belong to another history. Its sky may not yet welcome human lungs. Its ground may remain dangerous for generations. But it is real, and that matters. The child has heard of Earth all their life. Earth, the blue planet. Earth, the beginning. Earth, the cradle. Earth, the place where oceans had no walls and rain fell from an open sky. To the child, Earth is sacred, but distant. The world below is distant too, but in another way. It can be approached, studied, entered, changed carefully, loved slowly. Perhaps that is how belonging begins, not with ownership, but with attention. The child watches the planet, and behind them the mothership continues its patient rotation. Somewhere, water moves through roots. Somewhere, a teacher begins a lesson. Somewhere, an old recording of Earth's ocean plays softly for people born under another star. The fleet has crossed the dark, but it has not conquered it. It has only carried a small flame through it, a flame made of breath, memory, soil, language, repair, grief, and children. One ship could have carried survivors, but a fleet carried something larger. It carried disagreement. It carried music. It carried doctors and farmers. It carried old recipes and new accents. It carried empty rooms for future generations. It carried seeds from Earth and seeds of cultures that did not exist when the journey began. It carried not just human bodies, but the ability to remain human. And maybe that is the true answer to the question. If humanity ever travels to another solar system, perhaps it will not go as a single lonely arc, shining alone against the dark. Perhaps it will go as a fleet, a moving archipelago of worlds, a slow caravan of light, a civilization careful enough to know that the future should never be placed inside one fragile vessel. And long after Earth has vanished from view, long after the first passengers have become names, long after the children of the voyage become the elders of a new sun, the fleet will still mean something. It will mean that humanity did not cross the stars by escaping what it was. It crossed by carrying what mattered, the forests it could save, the waters it could recycle, the songs it could remember, the children it could protect, the mistakes it could learn from, the hope it could pass forward. And under the quiet light of another star, the old motherships keep turning, not as machines, not as monuments, but as the first small worlds of a new human story, still breathing, still remembering, still becoming home.